How we doing, YouTube? Coming at you today with another video, and today, guys, the bring to you is going to be an important guide to the Agov meta. This is going to be really important because I feel like for me, when I was playing at the YCS, there's a couple things that I was pretty sure of, and a couple things that kind of caught me off guard as well. So we're definitely talking about a few of the newer cards, the meta itself, where the tiers fall, and then also a couple tips and tricks to really make sure that you're ahead of the game. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Gem, Grimoire, Imperium, Dragonshield, or Cloud, definitely go ahead and do so, all down in the description below. Sorry if my voice is a little hoarse. I'm still very tired. I slept for like 12 hours last night, 11 hours, something like that. Then I woke up, went and did one thing, and went back home and slept for another like 5. So the YCS definitely brings a lot out of you, you know? But it was a lot of fun, May Day 2. I appreciate all the support. You know, sadly, I got blown out by Rika round 1, Day 2. So it is what it is. But we're going to be going on, hopefully, to Richmond. I want to go, so we'll try to make it happen. Hopefully I can. But that is very exciting. I do feel like I'll be very good at that event as well because I made a couple changes to my list that I think are going to go a very long way. And I'm very excited to see how they do. So without further ado, let's hop right on into the video. So talking about the tier list here, and this is obviously just from my perspective and playing at the YCS, this is how I feel like the tiers fall right now. Rescue is definitely going to be the better deck, which is really weird right now because it's nowhere on DB. Like, this deck is just not on DB right now. I watched like 12, 15 games, didn't see a single match with anyone playing Rescue. I think this is going to be another one of those events coming up where like just nobody like over respects it, and then all of a sudden it's going to win quite a lot. I'm not saying the deck's bad, it's very good, but at the same time, I feel like it wouldn't have done as good if people were ready for it because there's multiple variants that we'll talk about and how to stop them. So you kind of have to like start the match against Rescue and understand which variant you're playing against because they both handle different ways. Then you also have Unchained. I still think this is one of the better decks right now. It's really popular. We did see Cam Neal with it as well. The deck itself is still very strong, can do quite a bit. Thankfully for me, playing Tier Limit has a really good matchup against Unchained, but there's a lot of matchups that still have a really big problem with Unchained. Unchained's also very good into Pearly, which can keep Pearly in check, while Pearly also deals with Rescue very well because 3 field spell. That's also going to be very common right now, and Pearly is 3 field spell because, again, they can't use any of the trap cards on any of their cards. So it's something to really keep in mind, but Unchained is still very strong right now. Tier Limit, we did see this in Top Cut as well. Tier Limit is very, very strong right now. There's a lot of different ways the deck can be played. King of the Swamp, no King of the Swamp, Beast King of the Swamp. And then just the different kinds of tech options that you play. And just Tier is such a, it's such a high rolled deck that like, if you let Tier go off, the board is crazy. My end boards were like SP, Baron, Toad, Kaleido, Crime, Solic, Planet, Shuffler, Engrave. Like, it was nuts. There's a lot of matchups that I feel like Tier just has an overall advantage in. Of course, if you get hit with Shifter, then like you're playing the game a little bit more, you know. But at the same time, I still feel like this deck is really strong right now and something to really consider. Flu is Flu. D-Shifter, Featherstorm, blowout cards, double pot. Like, this deck is still really crazy. Something to really keep in mind as you're playing, of course, that you can end up playing against Flu. I played against it at the YCS. I played through Featherstorm and Shifter and won that match. So that was pretty tough. But at the same time, when you have a bunch of cards that say Mill 5, and then you have like pseudo cards that say Mill a few more, right? Like the Hell Shadal. I got into a crazy chain link. It was like Tier Cash Mill 2, Hell Shadal Mill 2, Agito Mill 5, Kelbeck Mill 5, Summon into Screen Mill 3, and I was like, I'm just milling out my whole deck on their turn, and it was crazy. But it was a lot of fun. A lot of things going on with that too. I also lost a game alternatively because I sent Kelbeck and Agito. I got drolled off the search before, and I milled a bunch of like draw and search effects, and I was like, oh. So that was bad. I still won the match, but like that game was rough. Pearly, this deck checks Rescue Ace, so I do have it up in the top 5. I think this deck checks Rescue, and Unchained checks the Pearly deck. Of course, Tier and Flu are kind of just like if you want to sub out like any other deck into the top 5, but for me, I still think this is pretty accurate as far as what we're seeing right now. Honorary mention is Vanadium. I think this deck's been doing a lot better than a lot of people expected. Even me, honestly, like I did not respect this deck at all, and I think that it's been doing a lot better. So I think that's something to really consider. As far as like a 6th slot, right? But as far as like a triangle meta-ish, it's not a triangle meta, but like kind of Pearly, Rescue, and Unchained. I think all three of those are very strong into each other. But at the same time, I do think these two decks have to be respected because they're just so strong. The ability to just high roll someone with Tier, or the ability to like start off with Flu with like a Shifter, or just going like Empid with Featherstorm is still really strong too. Just something to consider. Moving on to talking about the different variants of Rescue that you kind of have to know. So if they're playing the Jet Synchron and they're trying to go like the Synchro route, they're going to put up the Baron with a Savage and a Hydrant with 4 set. You can actually super poly these two into Draco Knight, which is kind of funny. So that's something to consider. So all you have to deal with is some back row. So it's not really that bad. And then if you're playing against Terahertz, you have to play against the Disave Wormengrave, which is going to be the Spell Trap negation while this is up. So if you have like a Kaiju or something, it shuts this off. And then this is Meteorologic Aggregator. This card is a impermanent resolution, so it gets sent from the extra deck, and on a new chain, it'll try to like negate something. So it's only on like ignition effects this card's actually decent against. It can be really good if you chain it at the right time, like the Terahertz. But at the same time, I do think that either of these builds have a lot of merit. You just got to kind of figure out which one you're playing against. So again, it's one of those things where if you are going to like scoop to a big end board, at least figure out which end board you're playing against, because it's going to help you a lot better in siding. Especially like if you have a Bestial, right? Because this is a dark, so you can go ahead and just clear this. Also just note that if a Terahertz is on the board, you can activate monster effects in the battle phase. So it's something to just kind of keep in mind. This also gets 25 bigger every time that you send something, and it can only attack multiple times based on the different attributes you send. So if they send both of these, they can still only attack like the 2 times, right? Because it's like itself and then 1 attribute. So it's something to just think about. Now, this card is probably going to get banned at some point. This card, all in all, was the craziest card of the weekend. The amount of things that were happening with this card were actually just absurd. If you play against Tier and they have Kaleido and Solic, you just summon this and target Kaleido. They chain Solic, you chain it and banish something else, which is just crazy. I play against Branded. I went Little Knight, target Mirror Jade. They chained Mirror Jade. I chained Little Knight, banished their Lubellion, the fusion. And then I resolved this. They resolved Mirror Jade, banished their second monster. And I was like, resolve Little Knight, and their Mirror Jade got banished. And then I just OTK'd. So that was pretty crazy. The other time Little Knight was really crazy was my opponent used Thrust. I chained Baron. They chained Droplet, sent Thrust. I chained Little Knight, banished Baron. So, you know, this card, if you don't have one, it's so necessary right now because this card can just win you games by itself. Like, being able to crack a board off this card is the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, this card is just better DPE. Obviously, 2 very different cards, but 2 very similar cards. This card goes wild. It's very good. So it's something that you really do have to keep in mind. If you see a extra deck monster on the board and a just regular monster or another extra deck monster, just know that you might want to do something to one of them before the Little Knight comes out. That's something that you have to think about now. It's like putting cards in Anima zones or Mech Knight zones. It's like the second an extra deck monster is on the board, Little Knight is in play. Now, you don't need a extra deck monster to summon this, but if you want the full effect of it, you do. So definitely a very cool card. The next thing is I do think that a mandatory card in everyone's sideboard right now should be Xyz Encore. We're going to see an uptick in Pearly. We're going to see a lot of it because, again, it does have a really good matchup into Rescue, and a lot of people are starting to figure that one out. So you want to make sure that you have Xyz Encore somewhere in your sideboard to go ahead and counter the Noirs. We do have this for Dweller. If you play against Unchained, you can use it against the High Wave King Caesar. There's a lot of different instances where Xyz Encore is really strong. This card is going to be one of the cards of the format. Highly recommend that you do have this, especially Rescue Ace being able to put up the Dweller as well. If you are on a deck like Unchained, it's to your advantage to have a card like Xyz Encore. So another card that I think is really underrated right now that I saw nowhere was Inscription. I think that should also be in everyone's sideboard if you're not playing like Unchained or Tier. Another very strong card that even Rescue could have played. I'm really surprised that we didn't see that more. But overall, 2 very, very strong cards for the sideboard. Droll, this is a bit of a weird one. This does just insane work versus Vanadium. Like, you activate this card, Vanadium literally just can't do anything. For the most part. And then you use this against Pearly, it's really strong. I really hate siding this in now against Fluenderies, just in case they have like the shifter, because then you're just staring at it. There's just better cards, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think that this card is like fine. It didn't come up at all for me during the entirety of the YCS. I didn't see it in my hand once. I tried siding it twice, and just never really mattered. So I don't know. I'm still debating if this card's completely out of my side deck or not. But it's strong, but only into a couple situations. It's not like super crazy. It's good against like the more rogue decks, but it's mostly there for Pearly and the Vanadium deck. So kind of take that in consideration. One card that came up a ton was Nibiru. That card was absurd. Nibiru just did so much at the event, but at the same time, I didn't play it. And every single time that I saw it come up, I was like, well, that sucks. And it was like 9 games, I think, that it came up that I just didn't have it. And that was, you know, what it was. But very similar to Nibiru is evenly in the sense that if you're dealing with an SP Little Knight, these cards can get inherently worse, because the amount of times I got hit with like an evenly, or I think Nibiru only came up like once, but mostly evenly. It's still the same interaction though. You can just chain Little Knight and start banishing your own cards. So like, I was playing against Flu and I got evenly, and I was like Little Knight banish itself and Kaleido, and then I was like chain Beatrice. Like, that's fine. I kept Super Poly, and then the name engraved made Dragos Tapelia. So against my opponent's 2 cards, I had Dragos Tapelia Super Poly, and my opponent scooped. So it was pretty crazy. And then my Kaleido comes back anyways with the Little Knight, so it was super strong. Evenly is just really not that good at the moment. I really don't like this card. I haven't liked this card in a long time, but even right now, specifically, it's just really bad. I think Rock is fine, because you can chain Rock to the Little Knight effect to banish, so you kind of have to like outplay your opponent a little bit better there. Because Little Knight also has to banish 2 cards for the second effect, so if they can only banish 1, the Little Knight has to stay, but you can also just like chain Rock. So it's also really good. I do think overall Rock's really good, but I think Evenly is definitely out of the format. That card is really bad. Droplet, this is another card that should be in your deck. It should be. This card is very strong. It came up every game for me, especially when you're going second. It's just a card that still says you can't respond on it, which is really crazy. It's just, of course, if you send like the required typing. But at the same time, the halving of the attack is also really strong. This is a card that just overall you should be on, because even if you're playing against Pearly and you don't have like a lot of outs to Noir, the second they dip below 5, you can just droplet the card, and all of a sudden like your game gets a lot easier. So overall, I think this card is really, really strong. But I do think that if you do have them, or you have the ability to get these, you should be on them. I do hope that you enjoyed today's video. We did go over quite a bit as far as the things to expect, so definitely let me know down in the comments below if you're struggling against any matchup in particular, and I can try to help you out with that too. But if you haven't already joined the Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or you want a coaching session over at Medify, definitely go ahead and let me know, and go ahead and look at all the links in the description below. I'll catch you all in the next video, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.